The Justice Secretary, David Lammy, will today set out plans to limit the ancient right to a jury trial in England and Wales in an attempt to try to clear a backlog of court cases.
It's a move which has already been widely criticised by opposition parties and by some within the legal profession. So let's speak to the Justice Secretary. David Lammy joins us now live from Westminster. Good morning to you. So I know you're going to give full details in Parliament later, but we got these proposals leaked, didn't we, a week ago? It got quite a lot of publicity, suggesting that people who are charged with offences like theft, drugs, fraud would no longer get a jury trial. It would be reserved for more serious offences like murder, manslaughter and rape. It's a huge change, isn't it? Or it would be. Can you confirm you're prepared to make that bigger change?
Well, can I start with the victims of crime? Victims who are waiting too long in our court backlogs for a trial. If anyone is raped today in our country, it will be 2028, 2029 in some cases until that case comes on. That is too long to wait, and that is why people are dropping out or not pursuing justice. And it's that system that we're trying to fix. We asked Brian Leveson to look at this issue, and he looked at it in depth. He said there's not a silver bullet to bring down the backlog for lots of reasons. The court system needs more investment. We are putting more money in. They need to sit for longer, and reform is necessary. And in relation to that reform, 90% of the work that's done in our courts is done by magistrates who can sentence up to a year. And he asked the question, should they be able to sentence for a bit further? There aren't backlogs in our magistrates' courts, so should we be asking our magistrates to deal with more cases? That's one of the questions that I'm looking at and I'll be answering this afternoon. And then there's a group of cases where you can get up to 5 years, generally speaking. They're called triable either way cases, and also where a defendant can opt to have a jury, and I'm looking at that. What I mean by that is if you steal an iPhone this afternoon from Curry's, should you be able to opt to have a jury? The trial may take 2 days, and inevitably that will cause further delay for more serious and egregious crimes like rape or murder. So that's the question that I've been looking at, and that's what I'll be announcing later on today. I want to be absolutely clear. Juries remain fundamental to our system. Over 300,000 people or so are serving in our juries every year. I'm grateful for all that work, and it remains the cornerstone of our justice system.
OK, a cornerstone, but not as many of them going forward, it sounds like. And I just wonder what's changed, because we've got a tweet here that you posted during the pandemic, so as the backlog was building up in the court system, where you said jury trials are a fundamental part of our democratic settlement. Criminal trials without juries are a bad idea. And what you were suggesting then was that the government needed to, quote, pull their finger out and acquire empty public buildings across the country to make sure these can happen, these trials can happen in a way that is safe. Why have you changed your mind so much that juries are fundamental, democratic, doing without juries was a bad idea, and now you're saying we'll do without them in some cases?
Well, the first thing is I want to reassure that I haven't changed my mind. They are fundamental in our system. And this afternoon in Parliament, I will be confirming that they remain fundamental in our system. During the pandemic, the then Justice Secretary was talking about reducing the size of our juries, and he too was looking at these group of cases that we call triable either way, and whether he should make changes. The backlog then was standing at 42,000 cases. Today, it's almost 80,000 cases, and if we do nothing, it will be 100,000 cases. So the facts have changed, and because of that, it's important that I reflect on the reforms that Sir Brian Leveson has suggested to the government, and of course to Parliament, and that's why I'll be setting out my statement. But juries do remain fundamental, absolutely essential.
Okay, but not as fundamental as you thought they were 5 years ago. Another tweet that you posted, doubling down on that fundamental part of our democratic system, where you also said that you don't fix the backlog in the courts by getting rid of juries. You said you don't fix the backlog with trials that are widely perceived as being unfair. So if it was unfair on a principle to get rid of juries 5 years ago, why is it not unfair now?
Well, your questions almost give the impression that we have the American system where everybody in Britain gets a jury. That's not the case.
It's not my questions. I'm quoting you yourself.
90% of people get a magistrate. But yes, in our system, if you can be sentenced to a year or more, you can get a jury. And so the question I'm looking at is, say you are charged with Class C possession of a drug, should you be able to opt for a jury? Or should that now be looked at by a magistrate or a judge? That's what I'm looking at. And I think there'll be many people watching the show who recognise that sometimes reform is necessary if you want to reduce a backlog for everybody at large and actually save the system that's the cornerstone for the more serious trials. And that's what the government's intent on doing. We've got to invest more, we've got to modernise, and we've got to reform. All three of those things was what Sir Brian suggested if we want to reduce the backlog in our courts. And I'm determined to do that on behalf of victims right across our country.
One of the things about juries is that it's supposed to give you 12 people from all kinds of different backgrounds and different life experiences who can collectively come to a decision. You get that diversity of decision-making. What you said again in another tweet 5 years ago is that replacing juries with a judge and 2 magistrates would reduce the diversity of those making life-changing decisions about guilt. And you particularly talked about the Black Lives Matter movement and saying it would be wrong to ignore the reality of unconscious bias in the justice system. So do you think there is no unconscious bias anymore?
I was asked by David Cameron and Michael Gove at that time, it was back in 2016, to lead the Lammy review looking at these issues across our criminal justice system. Absolutely, juries were fundamental, and 12 men and women of whatever background led to very good decisions. And I asked a senior researcher to look at this issue. It was also the case that I made recommendation about judicial training, about judicial diversity. All of that has improved since I did the Lammy review. And the real issue that I was concerned about was scrutiny and accountability, transparency of the decisions that are made by our judges. And again, AI technology means that decisions can be read and understood, can be transcribed, and I'll be announcing plans about what more we can do in relation to our magistrates in that area as well later on. So all of that has got better. All of it is fundamentally important. We have to have a justice system that everybody, whatever your background, whatever your race, whatever your religion, has confidence in. The jury system and our judiciary and our magistrates. And by the way, our magistrates, which we are increasing across our country, also are more diverse than they were 10 years ago.
OK. Another thing which has dented confidence and trust in the justice system is the recent headlines about accidental releases from prison. Have you been able to get a clearer picture over the last couple of weeks as to how many accidental releases have happened?
Well, I said to Parliament a few weeks ago, I released data at that point, and there had been 91 releases in error up to that point. There have been 12 since then. 2 are currently at large. That's new information that I'm sharing with you. I'm pleased that the trend is downwards because of some of the improvements that I put into the system, a new query unit between our courts and our prisons, digital technology to help to move the system forward. And of course, I've asked Dame Lynn Owens to conduct a review, and she'll be reporting in the spring, and then we will build on what she said.
Can I just be clear? So 12 additional accidental releases, are they since April, or are they since you began the review a couple of weeks ago?
I made it clear in Parliament that on a paper-based system, there will always be human error, and there has been a human error for all of my lifetime. Until we move to a completely digital system, I think it's impossible to rule out error. But there has been a spike. It's on a downward trajectory. There have been 12 since I made that statement. At the moment, 2 are currently at large.
12 more accidental releases. That's just in the last month or so. I mean, that would be shocking for people who would have assumed that since this became such a big public story, it would be less likely to happen. That's taken the total over 100.
Well, no, because some of those people have come back into the prison system.
But still, that it's happened an extra 12 times.
I made clear to Parliament when I spoke to them that the trajectory began to increase in the last 4 years of the last government because of their new release schemes and the complexity of that system, a system that we're simplifying with the sentencing bill through Parliament.
OK, but it's gone up. It's gone up a lot since you came into government as Labour, hasn't it?
That does mean every week there are 1 or 2 cases. It places huge demands on our police, particularly as we rearrest these people. That's why I put the systems in place to see the number come down. But we would have to move beyond a paper-based system. I've asked Lynn Owens to look at this. She was former director of the National Crime Agency. She will do that work, and we will build on that work so we see that number come down to more traditional levels.
OK, and as for these 2 prisoners accidentally released, now revealed but still at large, what can you tell us about who they are, where they might be?
I'm not going to give you names about that because...
Isn't that in the public interest, public safety?
No, just sit back. Often the police are about to nab somebody, and the last thing they want is that person to know that they're going to be arresting them. So that is an operational decision for policing, and I've got to stand by that.
Okay,
I've revealed more information on this issue than has ever been revealed before.
OK, those 2 people are going to know who they are and know that they're free, though, aren't they?
I've told you as much as I can, and it's more information on this issue than Parliament has ever had, the public has ever had. There are releases in error in our system. We're bearing down on the problem. The trend is downwards, fortunately, this year. But we have a mountain to climb on a paper-based system where 57,000 prisoners are released every year. The vast majority of them released appropriately, but there are errors. That trend, the spike, is unacceptable. But it's because we inherited a prison system in disarray. We lost many prison officers, by the way, 6,000 officers. The officers we have are often quite junior, making these complex decisions, and it's a very complex paper-based system. All of this, our government inherited from the Conservatives.
David Lammy, thank you for joining us. We will get that statement from the Justice Secretary in Parliament this afternoon about reform of jury trials as well. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.